Mhm.
Welcome to the Ecstatic Business Show. Kimberly was just putting on her brain expanding contraption to make sure that she's expanding her brain so that we can expand yours. Today is going to be an amazing episode. Kimberly has an amazing story, and I can't wait to share about moving from tech to Silicon Valley to the soft sciences and how she discovered that humans are the most important part of the equation and how we can go deeper and build really deep, beautiful relationships with our teams, with our coworkers, and really create amazing community inside of our corporate cultures. So, Kimberly, so glad to have you on the show.
What a thrill. Thank you, Caitlin. It was so wonderful to meet you and get to know you.
Yes, I'm so excited to go deeper. And I would love for you to share a little bit about your story of transition from where you started and that you were one of the pioneers for women in tech and kind of share a little bit about that.
It was such a journey. Yes. I grew up in rural Western Pennsylvania, went to the U.S. Air Force the day I turned 18 so I could get money for college because I had a dream of being a scientist. Went to college for 7 years, working part time and getting scholarships. And so I would have no debt when I graduated. And I got my bachelor's degree in chemistry and physics, master's in physics. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to be a scientist. It was hard. It was so hard. I remember like sitting at the table in the library, working on one problem for 20 hours, just crying and looking up and across the desk, my other schoolmate, he was also crying. It was hard. But then, so then I had kind of big disappointment. I wanted to get a PhD, right? And after I got my master's, I stayed one more year. I was working really hard and I was just getting abused by this professor. And he didn't like me and he was kind of triggering my PTSD from childhood. And I was like, I can't do this. And I
Yeah.
left and I felt like such a failure. And it took me such a long time. I'm like, I am a failure at my life dream. Oh my gosh. Well, I got, you know how that is, right?
Really hard. Yeah.
Then I got hired at HP as one of the first women repairmen fixing mass spectrometers. Then at HP for 10 years, 7 different jobs. 2 of the jobs I had to switch to because I was driven out because of harassment, not sexual harassment, but my personality. You see how I am? I'm kind of intense and I'm a little noisy. And some of the guys, they really, I mean, I was a woman physicist back in a time where there were 2% women in physics and only 20% women in engineering. And I was leading teams in R&D, and I would go to the meetings and say, should I wait for the other women to arrive? Oh, just kidding. There aren't any.
I bet they loved that.
You know what? One of the engineers told me, talking to you, Kimberly, is like talking to a blowtorch.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, oh, really? So I finally had to leave Hewlett Packard because actually I was kind of blinded to this. But he sent me to a coach who was the same coach who was coaching the CEO of HP at that time. And she said, what are you doing here? 80% of the people here are ISTJ Myers-Briggs type, kind of a typical introverted engineer. And I was ENFP. You know what that means?
That's me. I'm an ENFP.
Oh, you're ENFP. So how has that impacted your life, Caitlin?
Oh, I mean, yeah. Well, I actually was an ENTP for the longest time. And then I just took it last night and it was like, oh, you're now an FP. And I was like, oh, that makes sense because I've transitioned from being cerebral and analytical into being like feely and people oriented. And I was like, how interesting. Like the rest of it, the extrovert, the intuitive, the perceiving, that's always been pretty solid. But that T and P for me, I just discovered can wiffle waffle. So that was kind of a fun discovery that I think you and I are probably on a similar journey of going from almost left brain to right brain and prioritizing the heart over the head. So yeah, I get that journey.
And you just took it last night?
Yeah, last night. So that's very fresh in my memory.
Wow, that is so timely. Yeah, well, I'm like right on the edge of the F and T because I got
Yeah.
kind of trained out of the F by all my
Yes.
intellectual. So after
Right.
HP, I'm like, okay, HP was laying people off. I'm like, please pick me. I want to go.
Mhm.
I thought it was going to change that whole company. It was 100,000 people, and finally I realized I'm not going to change them. What am I thinking? So I
Yeah.
quit and I went to well, I got laid off. I laid myself off. Yeah.
Sure.
And then I went to work. I was in Silicon Valley. So I
Mhm.
went to 3 failed startup companies in 3 years. It was exciting.
That is the way of startups.
Because every time one failed, Caitlin, I got a raise and a promotion to the next one.
I
Oh,
love it. This is the way to leverage this.
because every time I would get laid off, I'm like, "Ooh, yay! I'm gonna get a raise, yay!" I
Way to
mean, because
reframe the experience. I like it.
you always have to find the treasures hidden in the tragedies, man. And then
Mhm.
the dot-com bust happened. It was
Mhm.
so okay. That was 2001, a long time ago. Maybe some people weren't even born then, but I lived
Mhm.
through that. And I was like, oh, let me start my own business. That'll be exciting in the worst possible economy, since in decades. So I
Yeah.
started my own consulting business, and it
Mhm.
was really hard.
Mhm.
I was doing product development, project management, product lifecycle consulting, and the people who hired me were the people who I'd worked with in these past companies, right?
Mhm.
And eventually, okay, 3 years it took me to start to break even. So when people say they're starting their own business, I say, "Oh, great! The first 3 years are the hardest." But then I was so
Uh,
lucky because I started
yeah, but you slogged through. You made it. That's
yeah,
amazing.
you know what? That's what you have to just keep going. It's like you don't just like lay down and give up. I'm like,
No.
okay, keep going. I borrowed money from my mom from our house, and I'm like, hey, maybe I'll have to sell our house and live in a trailer park somewhere. I did that
Mhm.
before. It's not so bad.
Yeah.
And then gradually I connected with people at the university. I was teaching classes in project leadership. And then they introduced me to these people from Japan who wanted me to help them transform their minds. And after that, it was off to the races. They took me to work with 50 Japanese companies. In the last 20 years, I've worked with 50 Japanese companies all over the world, including the likes of Yamaha Motors, who does business in over 100 countries. I mean, I worked with them for over a decade, and it was incredible adventure. And if I had
Mhm.
given up, I would have missed out on all that. So
Yeah.
here's what the big failure Kimberly Wiefling became, working all over the world with global Japanese companies and writing a book that gets me invited to speak in Bulgaria and Australia. I mean, like, woohoo! Little girl from the Hicks.
I love that. And that is what the whole point of our sacred success stories is about, is recognizing that the things that are hardest in our lives usually end up paying the best dividends, right? It's those
Yeah.
stories of failure and heartbreak when our entire world goes up in flames, that when
Yeah.
we rise from the ashes, we have a new, more profound sense of our strength and our resiliency, and we remember what's possible in everything that we do. I love this. So, Kimberly, unpack more about what you're doing now and the work that you're doing with these companies. I'm also super intrigued with what do you see as the difference between American companies and Japanese companies? Because I have my own like feelings and thoughts about this since traveling, but I didn't actually do consulting work abroad. But tell me first, let's start with that American versus Japanese. And then I want to go into what are you doing now? And like, what are some 3 practical things that entrepreneurs can be doing
Yeah.
to engage their community and create better culture? So, first
Ah,
though,
okay.
difference between Japanese and American companies. What do you see as kind of broad brushstrokes, the
Wow.
difference between our cultures?
I think it's so important to recognize that when someone like an American goes to Japan, like I've been there over 100 times and I'm going to go again this month and I keep
Mhm.
working there. Uh, we really don't see the real Japanese culture. It is so difficult to perceive what exactly
Mhm.
is going on there. So I always like to say, out of respect for my Japanese experiences and my Japanese colleagues, I do not understand Japanese culture.
Okay.
I admire it. Okay. The people are so kind and polite. But one of my friends in Japan, I said, "Oh, I love Japanese people. They're so kind and polite." And she said, "Maybe we are just pretending." And I was like, well, that's called being civilized. So
The Japanese are quite possibly the most civilized people on the planet.
absolutely. And then when I work with organizations, there's a huge shame associated with making mistakes and failing in Japan. And so they come over and they ask me, "Hey, Kimberly, please help us become more innovative and give us Silicon Valley mindset and make me innovation man." And I say, "Oh, great, sure. When's the last time you celebrated a failure? Shippai shimasu, woo!" And he's like, I do not celebrate failure." I'm like, "Well, then you cannot be an innovation man. So, or innovation woman, okay?" And so I told him, "You must make at least 3 mistakes every day in my workshop, or you fail the workshop." And he goes, "I must make a mistake or I fail?" I'm like, "Yes." And my assistant, she'll be writing down, keeping track. So make sure you tell her so she can record. And so 2 hours later, this guy shouts, "Kimberly-san, I made a mistake. Please write it down." Because in Silicon Valley, my goodness, the sign of the last company that was on the same campus as Facebook, their name is still on the back of the sign to remind people, hey, companies come and go. We don't call it a failure here. We call it a prototype.
I love that. And I really want to highlight that for our listeners is making mistakes is not failure, right? I've gotten to the point where, how do you spell failure? You spell failure Lesson, right? If you have learned your lesson, it was not a failure, right? So it's just continuous iteration and progress. And the only failure is not trying or giving up, right? That's the only way that you fail. As long as you are trying new things, learning from your mistakes, like Nelson Mandela's quote, "I never lose. Either I win or I learn." Like that has become one of my core mantras is I never lose. Either I win or I learn. And so that idea that you're forcing people to make mistakes or they fail kind of is like this mind-bending paradigm shift where mistakes makes you successful, right? You're being successful if you're making mistakes and moving forward. That is beautiful gold.
Well, there's the data. I'm a scientist, right? The data is it takes like 3,000 raw ideas to get one commercially successful product. So if you're not willing to experiment and explore and make, quote, mistakes, you're not going to find that success.
Yeah, nope. That's a really good reminder too for entrepreneurs who are starting out, because I think we get so in love with our baby. We're like, this has to work. Right? But I know when I started, I went through at least a dozen failed business models. I routinely come up with full-fledged business plans that I am never going to execute on, right? Like it's just this idea that you need to be in a constant state of creativity and innovation and possibility. And like one of my clients, he has small bets. So he says, how can you make the smallest bet to get the most information, like feedback loop, and how quickly can you do that, right? So a flow state is one that is marked by instant feedback. We can't always get instant feedback, but the faster we can get that feedback from the marketplace of, how can I do this? So instead of, I'm going to buy an entire store and put out all this inventory and we're going to see if I can pull off a retail company, say, okay, well, I'm going to buy a couple products. Like I was just talking to a gal at a recent event and she was like, I looked everywhere for the thing I wanted. I couldn't find it. I went on Pinterest. I went to Hobby Lobby. I made my own. I took it to a craft fair. I didn't even have any inventory. I simply said, would you like to buy something like this? If so, put your name down. And she got 40 women to pay her for a thing that she had only one prototype example of. And
Oh,
that's what's allowed her to build her entire organization. And she's on track to do 2 million this year, right?
wow.
So it's
Fantastic.
amazing how you can start with just what is the smallest bet that you can find to test your idea, to see if it holds water with the marketplace, and iterate. Like, how can I make this better?
Yes.
What can I be doing to improve? And if your ego is not involved, that makes this a lot easier because you're not heartbroken when somebody says, actually, I think instead of that way, you should do it this way. Then it's just
Yeah.
valuable insight. Thank you so much. I am so grateful that you were willing to trust me with this feedback. So, yeah, so beautiful. I love this. So, what else?
Absolutely.
What are you working on these days?
Oh,
What do you think is the most important thing in business that you would love more business owners, operators to appreciate in shifting their business's focus and the direction that they're moving?
Well, I think what you just said is crucial. Well, first of all, you have to know big why. Why are you in business? What is your purpose beyond profit? Mission that matters. If you don't know why, if you're just in it because you're playing the Silicon Valley lottery and you hope you're going to make enough money to quit the job you hate, I mean, that is no reason to be in business. So you got to know why you're doing it. And then after big why, it's big who. Who cares? Who are you serving? Who are you helping? And who will be truly heartbroken if you don't succeed in this business, right? Besides yourself. And there's the stakeholders, right? And sometimes that is a very complex universe. When you start to draw all the different stakeholders, there's not just one customer. There are many different kinds of customers, and some of them may want a different kind of service or product. And if you really understand the big who, your stakeholder analysis, you'll be much better at providing them the big what. What exactly would delight them? What exactly would have them toasting you at the celebration party saying, wow, your product is awesome, your service is incredible, and then the measures of that success. So you got to do the big why, big who, big what, and measures of success. And then the how is so much easier. I mean, you wouldn't jump into your car and just start driving at top speeds. You know where you're going. You've got the map. You set your destination, and then you go.
I love this. Okay. So and I think that's really important because I do feel like as entrepreneurs, we do sometimes get focused on the what, like, what am I selling? But if you have not done that why and who work, it's going to be really difficult. So I'm putting that in our comments because,
Thank you.
I think it really has to start with your mission and then your people, and sometimes vice versa, right? So sometimes it's, I really love this demographic. So for example, my little sister is like, I love divorced women, right? Okay, great. Well, then we go for, we know the who is the mission. Then we ask them, what do you want and need? What would you be willing to invest in? What problem can I solve? So as entrepreneurs, like, our job is just problem hunting. Our job is just to go around sleuthing for the gaps and saying, what is the problem? Where is the pain? Which is weird for a lot of people. Like, oh, you want me to go looking for problems? You want me to go hunting for pain? Like, we're such optimists. Everything is peaches and roses and sunshine. But no, like, you need to go find the problems and hunt down the pain points.
Well, that's an excellent point. People won't take their vitamins, but they will take a painkiller. So if you really want people to embrace your product or service and love it and use it regularly, it's got to be solving a problem for them that feels a little bit of pain in their life. Of course, we want to surprise and delight them, and people take painkillers, not vitamins.
And it's such an interesting psychological phenomenon for humans is our ego is not interested in the future. Like, our ego cannot really anticipate a future reality that's better than its current reality. So we will always be more inclined to solve the pain and the friction of our current state than we will be to invest in a future happiness. Like, we simply, biologically, we have not lived enough years where the future is significantly different from our past, that our DNA has shifted, that it can anticipate that in a practical way. So yes, this is why you're 30% more likely to buy a pain-driven or click on a pain-driven headline or a scarcity-based headline than you are a positive, upbeat, abundance headline. So
Uh,
we definitely have this negativity bias that's been encoded into us.
yes, that's
And
right. I mean,
yeah.
you know this, negative people appear smarter. So if you criticize, condemn, and complain, people will think you're smart. You'll be irritating as crap, but you know, they'll think you're smart. Now, I call these people the cave people, citizens against virtually everything. Yeah. And if you're like me and you say what's possible, what seems impossible, what might make impossible possible, and let's start working on it. And you know, it's basically a form of scenario planning, Caitlin, right? It's not, I didn't make up this crazy hallucination. It's like the way you create the future is you jump to the future and create a clear and vivid image of that future. You can see it, hear it, smell it, feel it, taste it. And then you can work backwards from there to figure out what should you do this week, this month, this quarter, this year. I mean, but it is really scary because people, it feels like jumping off a cliff. And while you're falling and screaming, growing wings and learning to fly. Okay, it is scary. And if someone says, well, the first question someone will ask you if you start talking about this future dream is, yes, but how will you do it? How is not the question. Big why, big who, big what, exactly, and measures of success in a clear, vivid image, and later how. But people do what is called rush to solution. And the first time you ask how, it collapses the whole creativity process. So you have got to say, that's a good question for later. We will first diverge and explore and expand possibilities, and later we will choose which to execute and which not to do. This is basically called scenario planning. No company in the world starts planning by saying, what should we do tomorrow?
Ooh, that's a really good point. That strategy has to start with the end in mind, right? And then bring it back. And I love that idea of visualizing it, right? So I've done this with my clients with goal setting is I talk about a lot of feminine, masculine energy. And so I'm like, start in your feminine, feel all the feelings, visualize it, touch it, taste it, feel it, everything you just said. Like, this is what success feels like when everything I've wanted to achieve has been achieved. This is the experience that I want to have on the other side of that. Then we move into masculine or left hemisphere and we start, okay, reverse engineering, making the plan. What is it going to take for me to get from where I am to where that future state? And now let's build a rubric. And if you're doing a job description, what are the key performance indicators? If you're doing a goal, what are the key milestones, right? And having that strategic element to it. But then I say, but that's not the end, right? Then we move back into feminine state. So once we have the game plan and the map built, the day-to-day execution is led by intuition. It's led by a flow. It's led by listening and just saying, okay, I know what the strategy is. I know where I'm heading. I'm going to recognize that I've got my North Star and I've got my GPS coordinates. And in the moment, I'm allowed to do detours. Like I am allowed to kind of dance my way through the real time shifts of life and say, sometimes my thing says that I'm supposed to send out 15 emails. But what I'm really going to do is go take a nap. That is exactly the right thing to do in that moment.
Oh, yes, right on. Yeah, well, you have to be experiment, prototype, iterate, right? Take necessary risks, experiment, prototype, learn from mistakes, iterate, keep going, keep growing. I mean, the Japanese even have a saying, Nana karobi ya oki. 7 times fall down, 8 times stand up. So, and you know, it doesn't hurt if you have some wonderful colleagues saying to you, hey, Caitlin, you can do it. Come on. You know, this is just a setback. You're awesome. And I see the amazing, incredible bounty in you and your incredible future. And then program our brains with the help of our wonderful friends, program our brains with a pattern of that success, because Our brains are pattern recognition devices.
They
And
are.
whatever you put in there, it will be like, oh, notice it. I mean, 10 million bits a second is coming into our brains, and only 20 to 40 are raised to conscious awareness.
Yeah.
Which 20 to 40? The ones that match what's important to us. So if you do a little experiment right now, you just stand up wherever you are and you look around the room. You look around, the whole thing. And then I ask people, okay, how many red things did you see? 2. Okay, now count the red things. Oh my God, 7, 12.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you are looking for, you will see it.
My favorite thing is if you do that one next time, say, okay, I want you to look around the room for 30 seconds and find all the red things. Okay.
Yeah.
So ask them to open their eyes, look at all the red things, close their eyes. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you ready? All right. Now, how many blue things were in the room? And what they realize is their brain has just completely filtered out all of the colors except red, because you gave them instructions on what to look for. And our brains I used to think our brains were like spotlights, like go find something. They are not like spotlights. They are filters, and their job is to just cut out all of the peripherals that keeps you from finding the thing that you want to find. And that's when you realize, like, dang, I have some serious biases. Like, I can't even see the things that I am not actively looking for, which, as you think about this in business, like, how many blind spots are we walking around with as leaders that it's so far in our, like, this is what I know. This is what I know I don't know. And this is everything I don't know that I don't know.
Oh my gosh. I love that, because I often work with people who say things like, well, Kimberly, that's not feasible, or that's impossible. And then sometimes it's annoying to them, but I say, okay, now here's a pie chart of 100% of all knowledge, all wisdom in the entire universe, everything any human being could possibly know. Please graph how much you personally know. And I get them, like 1% or 0.00001%. And I'm like, well, then shut up, because something in the 99% point that you don't know could make this possible or even easy, So why are you going to kill my dream when you only know 0.0001% of everything in the entire universe? Why can't you at least for 3 minutes listen generously to my possibility speaking and say, interesting, tell me more. And later you can kill my idea.
I love that. Yeah. And it is so true, because I feel like there are people in our lives who they feel like it's their responsibility to bring you back to their reality. Like, I have people, namely one of them is my mother, right? Who I'm like, they are the dream killers. And it took me a long time when I was a young aspiring dreamer and I had zero competence and no proven track record. It was really unfortunate that I would grow up in that sort of an environment. But what ended up happening is I'm now grateful for that, because I now have her voice in my head. And so now when I am ready, I can come up with my ideas. I can stay in my creativity mode. And when I'm ready to turn it into strategic planning, I'm really grateful that I have that critic in my head who can walk me through all of the worst case scenarios. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Now I can build plans to overcome them. And then once I've got it and I've done some market research, then if I still need a bona fide dream killer, I can now take the business plan and say, okay, I'm ready. Here's your red pen. Rip it to shreds. I want to see what this is like. Where are we going to fail miserably?
Yeah.
And now I can really welcome and be grateful for that level of feedback, because I'm not viewing it as personal criticism or condemnation. So it took a lot of internal healing to get to that state. And even with my daughter, my daughter's now 12, she'll bring me things like her speech. And I'm like, I need you to tell me, do you want me to read this as your mother and tell you how amazing and beautiful and gifted and talented you are? Or do you want me to read this as your editor and tell you how you can improve it? And so usually I start with the mommy affirmations, then we go into editing, and here's how we can improve it. And then I have to always anchor it back in, and you're amazing and you're going to kill it. But recognizing that there's just different hats that we get to wear as moms, as leaders, as business owners. and we get to kind of
Well,
be there for our people.
well, so I mean, let's go back to the big why, big who, big what, and measures
Yeah.
of success. The next step after that in my process is big why not. Okay, let's talk about all
Oh,
the reasons why not, all the things that'll kill it, all the reasons why it's not possible, it's not feasible, it's not practical. And then after we get all that blah blah blah, whatever, this kind of verbal vomit out of the way, it's so important because that's important, because if you can imagine all the things that could go wrong, you can put a risk mitigation plan in place. And then don't stop there. Now you go to the light side. Big, why not? Why not?
mm,
And let's go for it. And then you can start with the big how. So big why, big who, big what, measures of success, big why not, and big why not, and then big how. And if you follow this process, you will have 4 times greater success according to the Project Management Institute. If you use a basic project management approach, what I just described to you, you will get more like 80% success rate rather than 20% success rate in your projects. Wouldn't that be cool?
amazing. I love this. Oh, all right. So you've already
But
given,
people
yeah.
don't want to do it, Caitlin, because when you are planning the big why, big who, big what, big why not, and measures of success and all that, when you are planning, you didn't ship any products, you didn't deliver any services, you didn't book any revenue, you don't have any visible progress indicators. And so it takes a lot of discipline to sit there and say, no, stop, think, organize, plan before we start. I give this to my colleagues. Stop, think, organize, plan. Big why, big who, big what, measures of success, big why not, before big how. If you rush to solution, it will feel great. You just won't be making progress.
That is so important. I think a lot of us are ready to jump into action because action feels like progress. But productivity is not progress, right? Like you can be active and doing a lot of things and producing a lot of stuff, checking a lot of boxes without actually making any significant progress towards your actual goal. And I think especially as business owners, we can find ourselves in that boat where we're like, well, I didn't get around to having any sales conversations today, but I rewrote the copy for my website for the 15th time. So I'm feeling accomplished. And you're like, we didn't actually do anything today.
Well, and the other thing is, there's different things, there's different challenges. Some tasks are like you're building a house brick by brick, you can see the progress as you go. But other tasks, like a sales situation, you might have to talk to 20 or 30 prospects before you get one to buy. Now, were those 29 failures, or no? That was progress. In that kind of nonlinear situation, activity is a measure of progress, but it's the right kind of activity. It's not going around in circles. It's filtering through the opportunities to find the diamonds hidden in the dog poo.
The diamonds in the dog poo. I love it. I love this. Kimberly, I'm going to start putting up on our video your resources. So Wiefling, WIEFLING.com. And then if you go there, the resources and tools section will have a lot of free goodies. What's your favorite resource on that page that a female entrepreneur might want to download? What's your favorite one that they can go find?
So I am very familiar with research on leadership and teams and organizations and what really works. And the leadership challenge model of leadership has 5 practices and 30 behaviors of the best leaders in the world. And the least practiced of the 30 specific behaviors is asks for feedback from my team of how my leadership impacts them. So I like the feedback starfish. So the feedback starfish is this starfish shaped thing. In the middle, you tell your team, here's the kind of leader I am committed to being for you. Here's the kind of president or founder or CEO that I'm absolutely committed to being for us, for this team, for this organization. Please help me. And then in the 5 areas of the starfish, you ask them, what should I start doing? If you were absolutely committed to helping me be this kind of leader and achieve this goal for us, for our team, what should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I do more? What should I do less? Is there anything I should continue doing? Am I doing anything right? Of course, you got to leave the room and give them post notes and pens and tell them to write in block letters so you don't know who wrote it, because it's very hard to accept feedback. But if you just ask your team, give me feedback, they'll be like, oh, you're good. It's too scary. It's so hard to give and receive honest feedback. The feedback starfish is a powerful tool to help teams overcome that terror.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it really helps if you as the leader can model that of like egoless presence. Like, hey, and I love how you started with the why. Like, here's my why. This is the kind of leader that I want to show up as, and I am committed to becoming. I recognize that I am not perfect, that this is a growth experience, and you are my most valuable mirror. Like, I need you to be honest with me. We can make these anonymous if you guys would prefer to make them anonymous.
Oh, you have to.
I think it's just recognizing. And then the beautiful thing is, like, if you can do it without getting triggered, I would imagine reading these aloud as a group and saying thank you for each one and showing that each piece of feedback is a gift would be a really amazing culture building experience.
So the feedback is a gift. And just like the ugly sweater that your aunt gives you on Christmas, you don't have to wear the dang thing. You say thank you. I've had this fight, about the anonymity thing. It's like, oh, no, my people can just tell me honestly. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. No. But if you have a position, title, or power in any way, people are not going to give you honest feedback. It's been studied by Bob Sutton at Stanford University. He's a professor there, and he studied power poisoning. And he found that people who have some kind of power, they receive more positive feedback. Yes, it's like a bunch of monkeys in a tree. If you're the top monkey looking down, you see a bunch of smiling faces. But if you're the bottom monkey looking up,
only scowling faces.
Oh, you won't see faces when you're looking up from the bottom. You see a bunch of
you'll just see monkey butts.
Monkey butts. Yes.
Oh, that's funny. That's a good metaphor. I love it.
Oh yeah, look it up on Google Images, monkeys in a tree. You'll find it. There's a lot of those.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful reminder that for those of us who are in positions of power and leadership and authority, to recognize that there will be this bias, which feels amazing, especially because usually as high achievers got there because we had a neurotic insecurity and a desire to prove our worth all our entire lives. So when we finally get to a place where people are saying nice things to us, we're like, yes, we finally earned it.
And also it's really if a person, even if it is so-called safe to give you feedback, if in your position of power, if the person has a partner who doesn't work, a kid in college, a mortgage, they're not going to feel safe doing that.
Or even just me, like I have some serious triggers around criticism and conflict, right? Like even if you invited me to criticize you, like I would not want to do that because that would be uncomfortable for me to do that. So it's like giving me a safe box, and I get to say nice things and I get to say hard things, and then I get to see some more nice things, like recognizing that there are other people pleasers on our team that don't want to be meanie heads as my family calls them.
I worked with one huge Japanese company, and then the Japanese person who was the president of the Americas, North and South America, he was so tough and I don't care. Like I grew up tough. I can confront people like that. And so in a nice way, I say, now, if you were going to do something that was terrible and was going to destroy your company, would your people tell you? And he said, probably not, Kimberly. Can you imagine? You have a company and your people wouldn't even tell you if you're doing something to drive the dang thing off a cliff? No.
Yeah.
You need to make somehow, we did something like, okay, if I do something really stupid, when I come back to my office, please make sure there's a rubber chicken on my desk or something. And then I'll go, that's a sign. I got to think about stuff. I mean, we literally did this with one CEO I worked with. We told him, if you do this in the meeting, we're going to have a bulldozer sitting on your desk when you go back into your office. So you'll know that you were too pushy in the meeting this morning. And so
Snap.
you would go back and go, oh, did I do it again? Or like, yes, you did.
Yes, you did. Well, I love that as a visual reminder is like everybody gets to hold them accountable, but nobody actually has to say anything. So if
Yes.
you are in a toxic environment, I could see how that would be a really fun, playful way to start bringing awareness to the situation without having to be the messenger that gets his head cut off.
Well, you do need to find safe ways to do it. So, for example, one group, I had a stuffed pig. And if somebody hogged the conversation in a meeting, we would just hand the pig to him and go, stop doing that. I had this horse, kind of a stuffed animal toy, and I made all kinds of cuts and put kind of fake blood on it and bandages and stuff. And so if somebody was in a meeting beating a dead horse, I would take that horse and just put it, in front of them and go, can we move on now? I mean, you try to make it a little bit playful, right? So it's safe to talk about the dangerous things. And so people can at least have a little bit of sense of humor about it. Because if you make people laugh, you can reduce the stress, and maybe you and your team, can confront things that would be just way too dangerous and risky and uncomfortable to address. Yeah.
I love this. All right. I want to go to the other gift that you wanted to give people away, which is a one-on-one call with you, which I love. But I want to know who should schedule this time with you. Like, who is your who? So your big why and your big who, so that people can say, yes, that's absolutely who I am. I need to schedule time with Kimberly, or nope, I'm not her who, and I don't need to schedule a one-on-one call. So tell me about your big why and your who.
Yes. Well, what I noticed was there's so many organizations, businesses, where people are disengaged. There's a toxic, sick, dysfunctional work environment. Everybody's unhappy. And even as you go up to the executives, and nobody feels responsible for this. And I mean, because I'll work with individual employees and they'll say, yeah, Kimberly, but it's our managers that need to change. And the managers, I know we got problems, but the executives are the ones that need to change. And I talk to the executives and they say, yeah, it's the president, there's nothing we can do. And then the president will say, oh yeah, when the chairman dies, then we can make some good change. I mean, literally, I talked to one organization where the chairman did die, and I contacted one of the executives and I said, I'm so sorry about your chairman's death. And I was told, yes, but now we can make some good changes. Oh, police, really? So look, aliens did not land on planet Earth and set up sick, twisted, dysfunctional organizations that suck your will to live. And there's a reason there's books like this, like Boss Hole. Okay. We are doing it. So if you want to take personal responsibility for what's happening in your organization, and you want to investigate, how might I be contributing to the challenges we are facing, and how might I make a positive difference? I would love to have that chat. And what are the things that seem impossible to you, but if they were possible, would transform you, your organization, our world for the better? And that's what I want. In 10 minutes, we can do that. We can start to say, like, all right, tell me all the reasons why you're all stuck here. All right, let's jump over those reasons and let's create a clear, vivid image of a future where you're sitting there saying, high five, yes, this is awesome. And this is what we want to see headlines about. And we want to be celebrating at our celebration next year. And let's talk about that clear, vivid image of the future. And what's one or two things you personally could do differently in order to support that, and invite others on that journey with you, just to get a little spice, because that's what I love to do. I mean, I do the collage workshop every year for the last 25 years. Like, what's a clear, vivid image of the future that you would jump out of bed? Woohoo! I want to talk to people who want to get fired up about an exciting, amazing future and take responsibility for making it happen, and owning that maybe they've been contributing to keeping it from happening. I don't want to talk with helpless victims. Helpless victims, please don't sign up for my free 10 minutes.
No, I love that. So if you are the leader of an organization and you have an impossible dream and you'd like to show up as a better leader is what I'm hearing. Yeah. I love this. So
Absolutely.
definitely book some time with Kimberly.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And
Or
I know
just
you've shared so many nuggets of wisdom on today's call, but I would love for you to kind of just wrap us up with what's the one thing that you wish more female business owners would remember as they're going through their day and their business growing adventure?
Oh, yes. Well, I think go for partial credit.
Okay, say more about that. What does that
Okay.
mean?
So you tackle some really challenging thing and
Mm,
you get 70% of it. Great. That's a C in college. You can pass with that. Maybe the next time you get a little better at it. I mean, you just keep going. You experiment, you prototype. You have got to keep going. You can't just say, oh, that was a failure. That was a mistake. Every failure is a step towards success. 7 times fall
mm,
down, 8 times stand up. And
mhm,
if you, of course, I get depressed and sad and feel emotionally challenged whenever I face failure. And I have faced a ton of it in my life, and some pretty horrible that I actually wanted to end my life. It was so bad. And
mm,
I didn't because I'm like, nope, I'll have to sink into the icy couch of despair for a few minutes and wallow in my grief. And then I will drag my sorry butt out of that couch and I will do it again. And it's
mhm,
hard. Sometimes it has taken me sometimes years to overcome the emotional hit of some of the setbacks and failures. And you just know that in every tragedy, in every difficulty, there's some diamond hidden in there. So now when something bad happens, looking back on all the times the bad things turned good, I say, what does this crap make possible? How exciting! What
mm.
is the treasure hidden in this tragedy? The diamond hidden in the dog poo. Why don't you tell that story, Caitlin? You've got
Yeah,
a
I
great
was just thinking
story
that's
for
the
that.
perfect transition to the story we were talking about before we got on this call. So the philosopher Alan Watts tells this story about this Chinese farmer who his he gets a horse or like no, his horse runs away. That's how this
Yes.
starts. So the farmer's horse runs away, and his neighbors are like, "Oh, that's bad luck. So sorry." And he's like, "How do you know it's bad?" And then the next day, his mare comes back with a wild stallion, and they're like, "Ooh, that's good luck." And then the stallion, he's like, "How can you know if it's good?" And then his son is breaking the stallion in, gets thrown off the horse, and hurts himself. And his neighbors are like, "Ooh, that's bad luck." It's like, "How do you know if it's bad?" And then the next day, all of the sons of the village get drafted except the son because he had broken his leg falling off the horse. And it was just this reminder, this beautiful story that what seems good or bad in any particular circumstance is always relative to the context of our greater journey, that everything that happens in your life can, and I believe will, serve you.
It-
Everything that happens to you can make you a stronger and more compassionate human, right?
yes.
Not everything is going to make you richer and happier, but everything can make you stronger and more compassionate. And for that, we can give gratitude.
And sometimes you just can't tell good luck from bad luck when it's happening. I mean, when
Right?
I lost my jobs in the startups, I was like, oh no, I lost my job. Hey, 2 months later, I got a better job with a higher title and a bigger salary. Huh? The next time I lost my job, I was like, yes.
Right. So just recognize that no matter what is going on around you in this moment, it is not the end of the story, right? If you have the big, beautiful things happening, great. Have joy, be grateful, put some of it into a rainy day fund, right? Like
Yeah.
have some savings. But then the bigger thing is when the low times come, remember that this is also a gift. That
Yes.
this, some of our lowest stories end up paying the most valuable dividends for our growth, for our wisdom,
Mhm.
for our improvement, and sometimes monetarily, right? That we can
Oh
use
yeah.
those to
I mean,
launch our success to whole nother levels.
I've had a lot of really painful uh, growth experiences in my career and in my life. And now looking back on it, I feel like I should write those jerks a thank you note.
Right?
Thank you so much for strengthening me. Thank you so much for
Mm,
building my muscles. I mean,
yes.
honestly, I did even write somebody a letter like that one time. I didn't mail it, but I felt the need to write to this person who was so abusive and say, you really made me strong. That really helped me develop in ways to become the person I wanted to be, I needed to be.
Yeah.
So thank you for being such a jerk.
I love that. Well, thank you, Kimberly. It's been so wonderful hearing about your story and your journey, and this reminder that there is no failure, just feedback, and that we get
Yes.
to find the treasure in every tragedy. This is what we are teaching at the Ecstatic Way, and the Ecstatic Business Show is all about these sacred success stories. Thank you so much for your time today, and the rest of you, sending you lots of love and big hugs. We'll see you next week.